So what has happened is it was decided in China, and by the way, if you get deeper into this, and I hope we will later, about why this is being done, this global cult that I have been exposing for 30 years, that is pushing the world towards this global fascist Orwellian state, which I've been saying was coming for 30 years, hello, we're here, has no borders. It operates in every country in the shadows. Politicians are just here today, gone tomorrow. That's always there. China is one of its biggest centers, along with America, Israel, Britain, Germany, Italy. And so just follow this sequence through. They decide in China early on, and there's a 5G element to this, which I'll get into later, that it's a virus. They don't isolate the virus. They test it, or they diagnose it, first of all, only on symptoms. And then they start testing, and they use this test, which is testing for genetic material, not COVID-19. And then it starts moving out into the West. And Western doctors, nurses, medical professionals, etc., are told this COVID-19 is moving out. World Health Organization, it's a pandemic. And we'll get into who owns the World Health Organization later. And these are the symptoms. So what do they start doing? Anyone with flu-like symptoms now gets diagnosed COVID-19 purely on frickin' symptoms. And so the numbers start to go up. The problem is that this is supposed to be a deadly virus, but there's not enough people dying to justify that description. So this is what they start doing. Anyone who gets ill for any reason whatsoever, by the way, even falling down the frickin' stairs, and goes to hospital, they now get tested for COVID-19. Now, because they're testing for genetic material, which is in lots of people's bodies, they get lots of positives. And although they're in hospital for late-stage cancer, for heart disease and heart failure, and for other caused flu-like symptoms, if they've tested positive for COVID-19, when they die, they are diagnosed as having died, officially, from COVID-19. This is why you are having more and more people, families, loved ones, saying, my family member, whatever, has been diagnosed as having died from COVID-19, and they didn't. They died from this, they died from that. They've had it for ages. Great example. For people around the world watching this, there was one time a famous comedian called Eddie Large in a comedy duo called Little and Large. And Eddie Large has had a heart problem for a while, it seems. And he goes into hospital with heart failure. While he's in hospital, he gets diagnosed with COVID-19, of course, tested him. And when he died, the wording in the papers, in the media, was that Eddie Large died in hospital after testing positive for COVID-19. He died of a failing heart. But COVID-19 will be the diagnosis, and the numbers keep going up.
And you're saying the total numbers of deaths in the world has not changed anomalously, but we've reclassified them as COVID-19 because they tested positive. And you said the language is interesting because they don't say they died from COVID-19, they died from after testing positive to COVID-19.
This is interesting. Been making this point now for some many days. Watch the media language as they used with Eddie Large. Overwhelmingly, they're not saying that this person or this number have died from COVID-19. Very difficult to die from something you can't even prove exists. They say, this is the wording, and you see it repeated all the time. This person or this number died after testing positive for COVID-19. Not that they died from it, but look at the implication. Oh, Eddie Large, he died from COVID-19. Oh, everyone's getting it. And so you have control of the figures by the way you transfer symptoms from other causes to you've got COVID-19. You control the figures by the way you test, not for COVID-19, but for a genetic material. And you control the death figures by who you designate as died from COVID-19 when they've died from other things. You know, people are being designated to have died from COVID-19 who have late stage cancer. And here's a figure for you, Brian. This is official figures from the Italian medical establishment, what we would call in Britain the National Health Service. 99% of people who have died from COVID-19 in Italy, 99% have had 1, 2, 3 or more other health problems for which they were in hospital or for which they were suffering. And so it's so easy to take people dying of other things and to then designate them COVID-19. This is not to say all the nurses and all the doctors are in on it. You only need a hierarchy to say this is what you have to do, and they do it. This is how it works. Let's look at Lombardy, which is the center of the Italian outbreak, which has been such a focus of attention, and the rest of Europe and the Western world has been frightened to death. Oh, we could be Italy next. Lombardy, which includes Milan, is notorious globally for its toxic, polluted air, just as Wuhan is and China is. And therefore, vastly more people die every year in Lombardy, not least from lung problems, than do in the rest of Italy. The last figures I saw, just a small few hundred, under 100,000 people died in a year in Lombardy. The next second place Italian region, Lazio, was 57,000. So you have an area of Italy where loads of people die, not least from lung disease, and you have tremendous potential, therefore, to make this diagnostic leap, which takes people dying of other things and makes it seem as if they've died from COVID-19. And therefore, you control the figures. And what you can do, you can test in a certain way, and you can diagnose in a certain way, and the figures go up. And then when you diagnose and test in a different way, maybe you reduce the number of cycles of amplification of this genetic material that you're using in the test, the figures go down. Have you noticed something, mate? We had in China this extraordinary reaction, the lockdown. They were building new hospitals in a week to 10 days to meet the absolute devastating crisis of this virus, right? in next to no time by comparison with where they were, those hospitals are closed. The numbers have plummeted, they say. They're now starting flights. The economy is reopening. People are going back out on the streets. What happened?